allocate somewhere, and as I understand it, we really need to use it, or else it won't go till next year. It's um,
Yep. So Doug, when we set up the agenda, we put an old business item to look at the grant process from FY21. That was a request during the sort of review conversation. So we have a document to go over on that, and then we'll get into the FY22 planning and look at the roadmap and talk site visits.
okay.
And then when we get down to new business, we had officers, reallocation of funding. That's that 10,000 you're talking about. And update from the equity ad hoc group. It could be that we even flip the order of those two items, since the equity ad hoc group has a recommendation about the funding. But if you're good with it, we can start with the wrapping up of 21 and looking at that grant process.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get ahead of us, but I just knew that was one of the big items.
I think that this was requested by Paul. And so just wanted to thank Angeline for putting it together when she went through the calendar and all of the steps that the committee took. There's probably not a lot to discuss specifically today, but it's really good for us to have this in our records because it gets detailed, not just when we met and the major steps we took, but if you'll see on the April 15th meeting, it gets very detailed about the work that Burnett worked with the group on, where we narrowed down based on the scoring which projects to focus on, and the committee made choices around those individual recommendations for funding and how to get from scoring to recommended funding amounts. One of the reasons that we wanted to have that documented is that when we start looking at roadmap, we have, I'm scanning this, in February, before we start our next round of allocations, calendared a conversation with the committee to talk about confirming that methodology. If we're going to repeat that again in the next funding cycle. And when we talk about that, we're going to encourage the committee to talk about partial awards. So just wanting you to know, we followed up on that request to document the process, and we've set a time to open that conversation back up. But if you pan out and think about this roadmap from the big picture perspective, this is the months of our current fiscal year, FY21. Here we are in September doing planning. We would move into a facilitated equity discussion if that's the decision of the group, and have that. It could occur in October or November, depending on, I guess, October and or November, depending on how much time we want to spend on it and how much time it takes to plan. And then in December, the grant guidelines would get finalized, and the grant would the applications would open December 13th. No meeting in January, and we would be supporting grantees during that time. And then once we get into the spring of the year, February through May, the committee's focus is on the grant making process with extra meetings. So what we would ask the committee is for any discussion about this. And then if we have edits that we want to take home and make to this, we can do that. Otherwise, what we would do is plan to update your calendar invites to reflect it. I don't think an official vote is needed to approve it. So back to you, Doug. You're muted. Doug, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, it looks like we'll April's the tough month. That's when we got to really buckle down, isn't it? I had one other question. Maybe it'll come to me. Does that look good to everybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it does look good. Can you remind me, either Angelina or Rachel, how many grant review meetings did we need in this year, 2021? Did we do it with just 2 meetings, or did we need a third?
We had
So
3 in April.
We had
First,
3.
15th, yeah. So, okay, so
3.
just, we had 3, so there's 3 on the calendar. I guess my one idea, one thought would be if we need to shift those forward or earlier any, just so that if we need any time after the 28th, if the expectation is that we're delivering recommendations by April 30th or May 1st. Again, it looks good to me. I think we just need to be aware as that month approaches to make sure we have the time we need and use the time we have to get through the process. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. This is Rachel. It's a super time crunch. We have the applications in by February 11th. A meeting on March 3rd, so that gives about 2 weeks for the committee to have developed like any initial questions that we want to send to applicants. That's not a lot of time to go through all the proposals and come up with questions. If we get those questions turned around and ask them to submit them back by March 11th, I'm sorry. The questions would be due from the committee to county staff on March 11th. I got that wrong. So you would have a month. And then we would give the applicants a week to get their answers back to us. So then the committee would have from March 18th until April 5th to score everything. We could bump earlier. We just have to choose which section to take time to compress time on.
Right. Yeah, I guess that might be my thought, is to push the April 7th meeting up to maybe March 30th or March 31st. And compress the time either between the application deadline, which is when we start our review, right, and our chance to submit questions, or yeah, to me that looks like probably the best place to do that, because you're already asking for basically a week turnaround on those 1 week turnaround on those questions from applicants. So that would be my thought, is could you move April 7th up to March 31st, April 21st up to April 14th, and then potentially have, be able to fold in an extra meeting between the 14th and the 28th. And I don't know what day Easter is. I know we also need to be mindful of the state and county holiday that is then, and not impose time on people. That's all. Thanks.
Angela,
Sorry, this is Doug. I mean, I know 2 hours is a long meeting, but we could perhaps also have people aware that maybe we could go to 3 o'clock. I mean, or for a 2-hour meeting. I know that's a long time, so might not be popular.
What if we shorten the time that we have to initially review them and get questions? What if we shorten that by a week? That gives us a little extra a room. So if we're reviewing them for 3 weeks, then we get our questions to county staff. And then maybe we give a little bit longer for people to respond. Would that be good?
Sounds good. Turn the light back on.
Would
Yeah,
it be
that-
okay?
It's good to me. Go ahead.
Would it be okay if we bring back a proposed spring schedule based on this feedback at our next meeting?
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
great.
that's fine.
Great. Okay, here's the other complicated conversation, Doug, is the site visit planning.
Right.
We shared copies with everyone of the survey responses about site visits
Mm-hmm.
so that you all have had that information to look at. The question up for discussion, I'll take these slides down, is how to organize that site visit schedule. And Angeline has some, I think, information on that.
All right.
So the results of the survey shows that Friday afternoons is when all 9 members were all, said that they were available on Friday afternoons. What we were thinking is that we could just schedule like one block every Friday and have like 3 back-to-back 45-minute site visits that will be done virtually. And then that way it would allow a few minutes buffer between each one. And then, committee members, if they're available for that full 3-hour time frame, then they would go ahead and get 3 of the site visits out of the way on one day, rather than having to, try to pick and choose which days here and there you can do and everything. But we also could do it by site visit too as well. It would be 1 site visit per organization. And so if we started them within the next couple of weeks, by the end of the year, we could have all of the site visits done if you guys decide you want to visit all organizations. And then we were thinking that we could just let the grantees know, if they had a couple of pictures they wanted to show or something, that they could, but like they don't have to have like a formal like video walkthrough or anything like that, just to try to minimize the effect on them as well.
Sure. That sounds good.
Yeah, that does sound good.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds really sensible. I was wondering how you were gonna do this. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And it's tricky for us as staff to place a requirement or an expectation on how many people will attend, because it's definitely above and beyond the hours that we advertise are required in participating in this. And we just got done talking about how intensive spring is, and understand the pressure on schedules. I appreciate the excitement and the willingness to try to stretch and see how much coverage we can have. One question I want to make sure we confirm is, do you want to have a minimum number of committee members signed up for a site visit in order for us to hold it?
No, I mean, I think if we even if there's only 1 committee member that makes it, that committee member can bring back the information to the group. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I think 1 is enough, but that doesn't have to be the popular thought.
I'm recalling 3 when we did last time, but maybe that's totally mixed up. I just remember most of the ones I went on, at least seems like there were 3, but maybe but I think 1 would be okay too. Like Kate says, we can bring the information back to the group.
Yeah, so last year it was that we tried to limit it to 3 or 4, just because that way it didn't become a quorum and have to do public meeting notices and opening them to the
Oh,
public and
okay.
everything.
Mm,
But there were several of them that there was only 1 or 2 people on last year.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, this is Paul. I would say it might be nice, since we're stacking them on Fridays and organizing it that way. I think it'd be nice to try to set a minimum of 2 members on any site visit, but certainly allow that as circumstances come up and stuff, not cancel one because there's only 1 committee member present.
So are we looking at a maximum of 3? Is that sort of that is what we did last year.
If we fill our vacancy, I don't know if that's on our agenda. If we fill our vacancy, our number of members is 9. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mhm.
So we just have to be less than half. I don't know if our quorum changes when we have a vacancy, or we just always use the 9 count.
Yeah, the bylaws say that a quorum is 5. It doesn't say based on members, so.
Okay, so a max of 4 per visit.
Sounds great.
I think
Another
my one concern about there being only 1 person at the site visit is more from a personal angle. Like, sometimes I have trouble thinking of questions. And so it might be helpful, if we kind of have a stock list of questions that we can fall back on, or if there are particular issues that the staff is aware of pertinent to a particular organization, that if one person is there and they perhaps haven't done their homework as well as they should, or they just are not good at thinking of questions, we have questions to ask them.
I agree. I struggled at a few last time.
That's definitely doable from staff. We can equip you with a few questions that could apply to anyone. For example, pandemic-related questions. And Angeline or I will commit to being on every call. And that way we can jump in with questions that we've noticed from the reports or from last year's, hey, Annie, from last year's agreement or anything like that. One more site visit related question. Did you like and do you want to repeat the post-site visit survey where you capture your thoughts in remarks?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, yes from Paul. I think that's a valuable way to just complete the loop on feedback across the committee.
This is Doug. I agree.
Great. Quick recap to Annie. We're moving forward with the plan to group sets of 3 site visits for Friday afternoons, starting here shortly in a few weeks, and continuing through probably December. And we will have up to 4 people per visit. We'll have some standard questions that you can ask, and then any that you bring in and any that staff bring in, and we'll send the follow-up survey after. Did I miss anything on site visits?
No.
Appreciate
Th-
Angela in coordinating all of those moving pieces. She'll do all of the setup with the grantees and with each of you to sign up and coordinate logistics.
Great. This is Doug. Now that Annie's here, should we have a vote on the last month's meeting since we have a quorum? Am I muted again?
No, we can
So
hear you.
you're on.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Paul. I had a chance to review the minutes and we'll make a motion that they be approved as presented.
I will second that motion.
Okay, so for the roll call, for the roll call vote, Annie, you approve?
I approve.
Doug seconded, so he approved. Kate, do you approve?
I approve.
Liz, do you approve?
I guess I should abstain since I wasn't here, or should I just, yeah.
Okay. And then Paul with his motion would have approved. So, okay, we're good.
All right, we can move on. Where were we? Okay, new business. This is tough here. Yeah.
Angela, do you want to share what we got from Kevin via email?
Yes, so Kevin basically said that he is interested in stepping out of his role, but that he is open if you guys, decide that you don't want him stepping away or if you want him in another one. But then he also had a nomination as well. So let me pull that up so that I can just read it. Yes. So Kevin said that he would like to nominate Kate for the chair and Paul for secretary.
Is Paul open to that?
Paul is very honored to be nominated, but as you might have seen in my notes around site visits, had some changes at work that are taking more of my time and energy. So I would respectfully decline the nomination for secretary. But thank you again.
Well, it's a hard job.
Yes.
Does anybody else like to be the secretary? And I take it has to be someone from our committee. Is that right?
Yeah.
As a staff person, what I'll say is that Kevin is a great secretary and really embraces the role. He takes his own minutes and sends them to staff to review. In some cases, we staff committees where it's the other way around. Staff goes ahead and does the recording, and then we send them to the secretary from the committee to check based on their recollection or reword anything per their whatever that we flip flop it. So that is something that we're happy to do depending on the preference of the individual person.
Did we have people contact, are you there? Okay. Do we have people contact staff about interest in any of the positions? Okay. So are all the positions being re-nominated and our current people are not available? Do it again, other than what Kevin said?
I'm
happy.
I'm whatever. I'm good. I'm happy to, or happy if y'all want a new chairman, you're welcome to have a new chairman. I'm just I'm happy to keep going, but if someone else wants to step in here, they're welcome to do it.
I'm happy to I'm happy in what I'm doing. So, but I'm also really open to if somebody else is really interested, I'm not gonna compete, like take it,
This is Doug. My other question is, should we wait till next month where we have more members here to sort of talk about this? Was that an idea? I mean, I feel like it would be good to have at least 7 of us there. What do people think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think just trying to have a few members in addition to the basic quorum would be helpful. There's a slim chance we might have our 9th position filled by that time as well. So I'd suggest that we defer this action item until next meeting, and then maybe even in the course of sending out today's meeting minutes, ask people to reflect on their interests and to let staff know if they have interest in any of the positions.
From a procedural standpoint, our bylaws ask that this happen in July, and we have deferred it once to August. One way to approach it might be to vote to stay with the current slate and then reconsider in next month if there are proposed changes. That way we're not sort of, we've got some acting folks in the roles.
Right, I hear that. Okay, I like that. I'll make a motion that we continue with the existing officers in place and consider next meeting if there's any interest in any changes to that.
I'll second.
Do we need a vote on that, or we just?
Yes. Annie, what's your vote?
I agree.
Doug,
Yes, I agree.
Kate,
Yes, I agree.
and then Liz and Paul were the motion and second. So, okay.
Kevin
And
certainly
I
has
thank
done a good
those
job.
folks, Doug, Kate, and Kevin, wherever you are, thank you very much for continuing. Very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Kevin said he might be watching the chat because he has
Oh.
Teams. So if you type in the chat, he may receive that.
Well, he certainly has done a great job.
Absolutely.
Does he know that he can lean on your notes to reduce the load on himself?
Yes, he
Okay.
does.
Nice.
Best kept secret.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Kate, what do you think about having the equity ad hoc group update ahead of the reallocation conversation? Does that swap make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that's smart. Annie, do you want to take this? You're in the meeting. I just thought you eloquently stated, what we were all kind of thinking, and so we can read this, or if you have stuff you want to add. I just thought you put it so succinctly during our meeting.
So sure, I'll give it a shot. I was happy to have you, Kate and Rebecca, there, and staff to help think through what we might do on this. And I think our recommendation came for the $10,000 came down to really the first step being to hire a professional consultant to work with our committee. And if we could do it in time to have them at the October committee meeting, then what we would like to do is to first take a look at our equity question that was added to the last round grant cycle, and focus on that question and the discrepancies in our scoring, and kind of break down what is the rubric for scoring this, what is the thought process, so that we all have sort of some training on the intent and the opportunity to tweak or improve that question if it helps us get to a better end in the scoring cycle around equity. And then, so I think that was the first piece of the recommendation, with the understanding that that conversation could also lead to recommendations for us as a committee on, or new questions for us as a committee on how the whole process works from an equitable perspective, and things that we could put in place throughout, including how we measure our outcomes, our slate of recommendations, if you will, to the county from a DEI perspective, to be able to say that the equitable lens we're using is having an impact that we intended. So we had talked also about technical assistance and using some of this $10,000 for the organizations, but we had thought that currently we should hold on that until we get our process reviewed intentionally, and from there, because it may be that we need to use additional funds to, if this process happened to take longer than just one October meeting, that we could have it on reserve for those, for that type of consultancy, knowing that there are experts out there in this and it's not us. Is that right, Kate?
Perfect. Yes. That's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Angeline, did I get that right?
About the recommendation came from, we don't know what we don't know, but there are people with much more expertise that we should be learning from so that we can improve the process in any way we can. What do you guys think?
Paul, what do you think?
I like the idea of accessing some expertise. I wonder from a practical perspective, and this might be a nod to you, Rachel, on how we would go about, with an RFP or something like that, or how we would go about choosing a consultant, and is the time frame realistic to be able to turn that around in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks or so, in terms of selecting someone, giving them the chance to be up to speed or informed on our intent, our process, et cetera, and then being able to have those conversations. I also, I guess I like holding some consideration to, as you very well put, Annie, once we've refined our processes appropriately, seeing that some of that expertise then is available to applicants and is available to, seeing the results, which would be in future applications and future approvals. So, I like the phrase of Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, and I wonder if we need to maybe take a half step back and say, okay, what do we want overall? And is it part A, some consultation to us as a committee, and then part B, some technical assistance to applicants and future grant cycles, knowing that may mean, an October meeting might not be so likely, an October session on this might not be so achievable, but those are my thoughts.
Liz, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of struggle with what we're trying to do, because we're starting out with the assumption that we're not achieving equity. And especially the issue of inter-rater reliability, it's kind of like, well, we never really analyze that or look at that, but how, what's the connection between what we believe is inter-rater reliability and equity? So, so I'm struggling a little bit, because one of the impressions I do have when we look at the scoring is that there is often a very reasonable consensus of opinion between the committee members, and we kind of value the fact that we're a diverse group and we have different perspectives and expertise, and so I'm a little bit wondering, are you specifically focusing on how we rate the equity question within the within the scoring sheet, or are we talking about a broader issue And if we're talking about a broader issue, I think we really need maybe to define it better. And I know we've gone in circles around this because we don't have a very clear definition of what is vulnerable, an application from a vulnerable population so it's very hard to say whether we're, yeah. So it's just, for me, I struggle a little bit with the whole concept. Not that I think it's wrong to consider it, but I tend to want to look at it from a more statistical point of view, and I can't quite figure out how to grasp it that way.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, Liz.
Yeah.
I just was going to offer that I agree with the complexity of it, and that I'm not exactly sure where we're landing. We're trying to, I think that Rebecca was looking at that equity question as our one piece of data that we might have to sort of build off of. But I agree that that we haven't analyzed the outcomes of our decision process to say how well or how poorly that one tool that we have to assess equity in our scoring is working or not. So definitions are, more clarity on how we would define success for our committee's work from a DEI perspective would be helpful for me. And whether that comes from consultancy or another way we get to that is, I guess, what I would be hoping to achieve.
Good. This is Doug. And thank you all for the work you did in your committee. I'm sure you worked hard on it, and we appreciate it. I'm sort of tend to maybe agree a little bit with Liz. And I want to apologize if anybody in this group is a consultant. I think maybe is a consultant. I think is Chuck a consultant? I'm sure at times they can be very useful. My own personal experience have had to have been forced to hire consultants and pay out of my own pocket and been sorely disappointed. Just found that once they come give their spiel. I mean, it can take a long time, and it's time consuming, and then everybody thinks, oh, it's good, and then nothing happens. Anyway, I've sort of struggled with the whole equity question because I think we all do a pretty good job with it. And two, there is a lot of information available in a lot of different areas where we can do this work ourselves. And just thinking about it last night, I said, well, in one way, that's why the county commissioners chose us to be in these positions, is that they felt like that we had the knowledge and the wherewithal to research these questions. Anyway, that's enough said. But again, thank you all for your work, and I'm happy to go along with the board, whatever you all, what we decide. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. This is Paul. I'd like to pick up on one suggestion Doug made, and I guess ask you, Rachel, Angeline, Burnett, are there any resources within Buncombe County government or other associated public organizations where, I don't know if there's still a county human relations commission or other resource like that where we might be able to get, a little bit more, if we're looking for some more expertise from the DEI field, someone with those eyes to look at the work we've done before and to just sort of hear us out in terms of what our intent is in considering future changes and be there to help facilitate that.
In answer to your question, this is Rachel. I would say that last year last year's facilitated conversation with Heather and Amanda is an example of the kind of facilitation support that we have in-house. We have someone else joining by phone. And so if you'll recall, those were staff from Burnett's team, which used to be called Performance Management and is now called Strategy and Innovation. And in many ways, that's the kind of internal consultants to our county departments. So when we have initiatives that we want to evaluate or implement or gather data on, we bring those folks in to assist. And the goal last time was to look at equity in the process. And so we broke down the procedural steps of the grant making cycle. I was going to say from beginning to end, but then I called it a cycle. But we looked at each step in the process, and the committee had a conversation about ways to tweak that process to increase equity. And that's what started this conversation among the committee. Is I think that one of the committee members, in reflecting on the changes over the last year, had lifted that up as something that they were happy or proud of the work around. And then another committee member shared that it's hard to celebrate that as a success because it feels like there's more work to do, that it isn't a one-time task to be equitable. As I sit as a staff person and listen to the conversation, I too reach for that specific clarity on the question that we're seeking to address. What we can do is try to match the right resource to help the committee with that, whether it's staff or outside support. And so are we looking for somebody who's a content knowledge, what do they call, subject matter expert on equity, who can come in and offer training and education? And when we say equity, do we mean racial equity or do we mean equity in inclusion of other types? Do we want somebody who comes in more from the data expertise that can look at it from that statistical process? Is it really somebody that is an expert facilitator and great at coordinating groups? What is it that we need? And we can go get the right resource to help the group. I didn't narrow the conversation, Paul. I bet that's why you're smiling.
It's not a narrow thing, I think. So part of what we looked at for that conversation was at the end of August was the difference in how each committee member scored the equity question. And it was kind of a surprise to me, but it shouldn't have been. You know, we all have different perspectives and we all are working with different ideas and probably definitions of what equity is. And so, of course, we're going to score it differently. And so this idea was an attempt to kind of check in with what the definitions are of equity, how we can work toward a more equitable process, and from my personal perspective, how I can challenge myself. You know, I think I'm going to be honest and probably I'll turn into a meme or something, but I, you know, a few years ago, I didn't really ask myself many questions about equity, but I absolutely thought like I was seeing it right, you know. Well, no, in recent years, I have really realized I've got, you know, preset stuff in my head that I really need to challenge and really think about. And so when I saw the difference in our scoring, I thought, goodness, we need some help, maybe just to get some education, a little bit of training around it, and see. I don't think education is ever bad. So I'm not saying this very well, but I do think that taking some time to go through some education, and I think it's definitely worth it. We are chosen for our different perspectives, but we can always broaden our perspectives and fine tune our perspectives in order to serve the community that we're serving.
I think that's a great thing to talk about, because maybe the rest of the committee really needs to see that data. And that might be really the central focus of, if we're seeing a lot, it would be sort of interesting to know, are we seeing more consistency on other metrics than we are on diversity? And I suspect that we may be. I remember when I tried to score the diversity question, it was always hard because, as with everything else, a little bit of it is grantsmanship. Like, some people had great, full-blown responses on, because I think our question was about, how does your organization define equity? I mean, so I think it would be really helpful for us to maybe look at that question again and say, is that question really getting at what we're looking at? And then, I think we could look at the diversity of responses some way with anonymized data, so we're not putting any particular person on the spot. That just some people consistently score things higher on diversity and others consistently score lower. So I think that really does I think that narrows the question for me. Like, is the question that we're asking about equity the right question? Are there better ways to define it? And if whatever the question is, do we have a good consensus on the committee of what the different scoring metrics represent?
I feel like you just summarized very well what Rebecca was representing on our ad hoc meeting. If I recall, that was where her interest, as someone who worked very hard on getting an equity question in the application to be fitting for what we were trying to achieve, I think she had a lot of questions that you just summarized about whether it worked, whether there was still discrepancy. And I think that she evaluated it, or somehow Rachel, perhaps someone evaluated it and did see that whereas we were clustered together in other questions more often, there was a bigger spread on that one. Is that what the data showed?
Yeah, I shared with the ad hoc group the overall range in the scores. And on the equity especially, there was, on the same question for the same application, there was a range from as low as 1 to 10 on the same question. And while I have the floor for a moment, Kim, have you joined by phone?
Yes, I did. Hello, everyone.
Great. I'll capture you as attending for the minutes.
Okay.
Hi,
Yes,
Kim.
I'm in my car. So I had to join by phone. Just as soon as I get to my office, I'll be able to log in.
Hi, Kim.
Hey there.
So I don't know that we've conducted a data analysis. We pulled some data and took an initial look. If that's a direction the committee wants to go, I'm looking at my lower left corner of the screen. This is Rachel speaking, by the way. I'm looking at Burnett's little tile. We do have in-house data resources. And if that's the sort of within the broad conversation of equity, if that's a chosen starting place, it does seem like a conversation that we could help shape for the committee. To let me read back what I captured here. Is the question that we're asking about equity the right question? And if so, how do we want to? Are we using the same methodology for rating the responses? And the other overall question that I heard coming from committee was, how do we define success in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a public grant making setting, which is a bigger and sort of longer term conversation. And I wonder how those two connect, as well as the sort of third, if I've got these Venn diagram circles in my mind, the third one is what kind of technical support, technical assistance, capacity building, however we want to define it, might we offer to support either all applicants or subsets of applicants that might be historically less resourced. I did have an initial conversation with a provider of that type of service with WNC Nonprofit Pathways, just to strategize what that could look like. And if we engaged with a partner, them or someone like them, what kinds of services would they have available? And a loud and clear recommendation from my conversation with that team, with Jeanette and Nakanda, was that we make sure that this is driven from the applicants or grantees themselves and not driven by committee. So beginning with a discussion with groups that interact with our grant process to ask them, are there areas where you could use some additional support if it were provided? What kind, what might you take advantage of? So I'm thinking it might be useful because we have these upcoming site visits, which is a great chance to have dialogue with at least those groups that did get funding, successfully navigated the grant process. A question that we could add to those discussions. Another way to capture that information, if we choose to, would be survey, which has pros and cons, as we know. So I'm hearing kind of those three pieces: a narrower piece about the equity question and its scoring, a broader piece about equity in general in our public grant making, and then a spin-off around resources and support capacity-wise for applicants or grantees.
I think you summed it up well.
Yep.
Yeah,
What do-
excellent summation.
So the question is, what do you want to do in October?
Yeah, I think the way you laid it out is sort of the logical chronology too. So I guess what I would be in favor of is leaning on Burnett and his team to reflect back, what the data may tell us from, again, the first round this past spring, where we had an aspect of equity and inclusion in the process. And then I would say, if we can, again, this may be leaning on staff, develop an appropriate question or two that can be included into the site visit preparation for our funded applicants. And then maybe give us as committee members something to reflect on as well, in terms of getting at, what will a successful endeavor look like, or what is it we truly want out of, this conversation. So thanks.
This is Doug. Paul, would those questions be about equity in their organization? Is that what the questions that you would ask on the site visit?
Well, I think something Rachel said in terms of where will we see impact? It's not necessarily, and that was one of my concerns coming into the meeting today, is the resource, just the 9 of us with a sharper mind around equity, to me, isn't enough. It's not about the 9 of us as voting committee members. It needs to be about the larger project and, its evolution year to year. So
Sure.
They might just be, to me, they would be less about what are you doing now as a successfully funded applicant, or how does your project reflect equity, and more so opening up the questions, in our contemporary society, and in our this focus that we're wanting to draw to this. What would you like to gain or develop or be aware of as an organization, as an applicant, as a funded entity, around, DEI,
Mhm.
and then see what we get back.
And even, Paul, questions just around what gets in the way, what was hard about navigating the grant process, and what was hard about navigating our contracting process. Because when I've listened to the committee's conversations on equity, it's oftentimes focused on well-resourced institutional organizations and how effectively they manage grant applications and awards versus organizations that might be historically marginal, from or led by historically marginalized communities, or smaller or more grassroots groups. That it really, a conversation about the process is also a conversation about equity. And so
Right.
providing grant writing support might not be DE or I by its name, but might help advance those goals.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And you all as staff are privy to a whole level of, for lack of a better word, negotiation or interactions in terms of contracts and quarterly reports and stuff than we are at our level as committee members.
Burdette, do you mind chiming in and on any initial responses to how we might organize October, or do you want to save that for a spin-off conversation?
Well, I'm just looking at while Paul was talking, I pulled up the scoring download from April, which seems like a lifetime ago. And I mean, it's I can do some analysis on the equity question. So of the, equity was one of the 5 that was listed. And my initial thoughts are, I think what kind of some of the takeaways I'm hearing is that potentially I mean, obviously we all have different lenses through which we look at throughout this, right? So we're all going to have different perspectives, but I think maybe what I'm hearing, and I didn't see exactly how the equity question was worded, but from what I'm gathering, it was potentially open to pretty broad interpretation. So to that end, my initial thought is that, doing an analysis of all 5 of the different scoring categories and just seeing how that equity question stacks up against the other 4, right? In terms of, high, low value, and maybe looking at, stratifying it down to how many 10s did we have, how many 8s did we have, and so forth, or even, some median or average scoring across those buckets. So I'll play around with the data and try and come up with something meaningful that will hopefully draw some comparisons against the other 4 categories. So that's what I would propose from my end for the next session, but I'm open to people's thoughts if you guys have other ideas.
I am still interested in getting some guidance somehow from some source on the outcomes of the impact of our decision-making process on, and I know that what we're lacking is some type of definition on, what is a diverse led or operated or population served. I'm curious if there is a number of organizations that did not meet our criteria for funding and that would fall into one of those categories that we're talking about as perhaps marginalized or compared to those that were funded. Do you see what I'm getting at? Rachel, help me because you're so eloquent at restating things more succinctly.
Thanks, Annie. I am completely open to the group coming up with a question for the next cycle to try to capture our baseline data. I'm less comfortable trying to sort organizations into a category based on information we might know. Because unlike, we've had this conversation a few times, unlike a business where I can look up and see if you're an MWBE, there are ways to register with the Secretary of State's office declaring whether you're minority owned. And nonprofits aren't owned by an individual, so nonprofits don't have a sort of a demographic in that way. And leadership looks different. Does it mean that, is it the demographics of the workforce? Is it the demographics of the board? Is it where they serve? How do you know if it's community driven versus community benefit? There are a lot of ways we could assess that. The best way is to have some option for the groups to self-categorize. And we could add that to the questionnaire for the next cycle. And maybe that's one of the things we try to come up with in October and November.
That makes me feel good.
I don't know what that question is. It's a riddle, but do you identify as a minority-led organization? Or I don't know if that's the right, is it around equity related to Black, Indigenous, and people of color that we really want to capture, racial equity? Or is it equity from, other vulnerable populations like people with disabilities or people with low incomes? So whatever it is we decide, it will not be perfect, but it could be a starting place. And it's something I've tried to keep my ear to the ground and listen in philanthropy or other public grant making, any type of grants avenues to find out how other people are answering that question. And there isn't an easy answer. So I think we can come up with something to try, just like we did with adding an equity question. We knew we wouldn't have a perfect question or a perfect way to score it, but I think, like Kate was saying, continuing to keep this as a value in the process and making efforts toward it is important.
So I have one quick question, given this, where the conversation after report out from the ad hoc committee is that it sounds like we're not moving immediately towards consultation costs. But was there a deadline by which we had to have a decision about that 10,000? We have it for this year. We could grant it out or spend it by July of next year.
Yep. For anyone listening by phone, I'm nodding my head.
Thanks.
This is Doug. Yeah, I think it would probably be better if we had a larger committee, if we did make a decision. How do other people feel about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just think it would be.
I support deferring a decision.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't think we need to vote on it or anything, but I think maybe we can just save a decision for October. And what else do we have to go over?
Let me get back to the agenda. That is the end until we get to announcements. If you would like an update on the committee member vacancy, I'd be glad to share that as an announcement. We were disappointed to hear of Rebecca choosing or moving on and rolling off of her service on the committee, and excited to have an opportunity to recruit additional a new voice to the group. So that vacancy or that that application is open. You should have all gotten an email from Angeline with that information. Staff has promoted it to the public libraries that are located within District 3 of Buncombe County, and to some school-based resource groups that work within that section of the county, and kind of through networks that we have. If you have contacts or places to share the opportunity, we've got that email that you can forward. We even have it in like a flyer format if you want to hand somebody something. And I am happy to report we already have one application, and it's a great looking application. So we'll continue spreading the word. What date does it close, Angeline? It's in September, which feels like a long time. Yeah, doesn't September feel like not this month? Anyway.
Yeah.
So the position is open. We're advertising. Once it closes, commissioners will potentially interview if we have multiple applicants. If we have one applicant, they may not interview. They might just move to a point. So either way, if you
We have multiple applications now.
okay, great. Good. So commissioners, following their precedent, will probably conduct some interviews like they did the most recent round when Kim joined us.
This is Doug. Where is District 3? Is that like West Buncombe kind of area?
Slash south.
South Asheville. Okay.
Let me show a district map real quick. It is hard to read for me because the highways aren't on it. And so
yeah,
it's hard to see where, you
like
know, where's
limestone.
26 and 40 go, but Commissioner District 3 is down in this southwest part of the triangle, and the advertisement has a nice link where people can type in an address, and then it tells the representatives of that address, and if it says District 3, then they're